everybody. Welcome. Hello, good afternoon. It is so wonderful to see all of you coming from every single corner of campus. I was talking to some of you. We have people from the medical school, from Anderson, from education, from law. We have people from Denmark. We have people from Sweden also. So we have people from all over campus. And I just want to say, my name is Maya Ferdman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Bidari Kindness Institute and the Staff Director of the Dialogue Across Difference Initiative, which is housed in the Bidari Kindness Institute, as is the Initiative to Study Hate. And I just want to welcome you all to the first installment of our Compassionate Conversation series, which is co-sponsored by the Bidari Kindness Institute and the Dialogue Across Difference Initiative as part of our shared mission of building up the capacity to engage with one another with honesty, with passion, and with compassion. You may not know this, but today is actually World Kindness Day. So this is a very apt conversation to be having on a global day dedicated to spreading kindness and compassion as a way of being in the world, as a way of creating change in the world. We're really, really thrilled to welcome this phenomenal guest, Dr. Yasmeen Abu Fraiha, as our first guest for Compassionate Conversations. She really is an exemplary model of what it means to sustain kindness and compassion in the most trying of circumstances, and we'll hear from you in a second. And before I introduce her and Professor David Myers, the director of the Institute, I want to just say a few words of preparation or framing for this event and for our series in general, and just in general how we do our work at the Institute. Welcome, come on in, there's seats. If you have a seat next to you, raise your hand, an open seat. There you go, you have plenty of spaces. So I want to offer you an invitation as you're coming in today. I want to say first and foremost that I want to invite you to just engage fully and be present here with the subject matter that we're about to discuss. So that means if you need, we might be coming in with all sorts of heaviness or all sorts of a task or to-do list, and I just want to invite you to be present and to join us and land here with us today. I want to offer you an invitation and say that you may hear something today that's challenging and it might cause discomfort. It's a very real possibility. And I want to invite you to try something, to lean in to that discomfort, to acknowledge it, feel it, and to lean into what it might offer us, the kind of learning that it might offer you as we sit and work through it together. I want to also ask you to invite you to think about what it takes to meet discomfort, difference, conflict with compassion, both for yourself and for those around you in our growing community. The schedule, the way we're going to do this, the way the next hour and a half or so is going to go, Professor Myers and Dr. Abu Fraiha will be in conversation for about 50 minutes, 50, and then we'll be followed by a question and answer portion where you'll be able to engage with them directly. And after that discussion, at about 5:20 or so, we are going to invite you to stay, if you'd like to stay, and join in a small group dialogue with those around you, with people maybe that you haven't met before, to talk, to grapple together, to react, to listen to one another in reaction to what you heard in the conversation. In reaction, it could be something that struck you, something you're sitting with, either about the conversation itself or about the larger subject matter at hand. And I'll say that during that time, and I'll give a little more framing after the conversation for how that's going to go, but Dr. Abu Fraiha, Professor Myers, and I will be wandering around the room and supporting the conversations as needed, and we're around to talk also as well. We are committed to creating an environment as part of the Dialogue Across Difference Initiative where it's possible to have these kinds of intimate and brave conversations, especially when there's difference present. And in order to do that, we have a few requests to make of you as you join us in that effort today. The first one is that you know that we are filming this event. There's a camera over there in the back. We might be, I or Felicia, who's outside, or Maria, people from our team might be taking some pictures for the purpose of marketing. If you prefer not to be shown in any photo, just come up to me or to Felicia or Maria at some point and just let us know. And we will make sure that we don't take photos of you. And I'll ask that if any of you want to take a photo or a video, you may do so of our speakers, of any of us up here, but just refrain from doing so of each other at any point, just because we want to make sure everyone is comfortable in this space. I also want to just name explicitly that we absolutely welcome dissent or differences of opinion, and we hope you vocalize them, both in the question and answer portion and in the small group discussion. And that said, we also ask that you please refrain from interruption or disruption throughout the program itself. This is both UCLA regulation, and it's an important part of our dialogue across difference guided ethos to be able to create containers for that difference to be explored constructively. Sound good? I'm like seeing lots of nods. It's great. Wonderful. And later I'll share a few additional guidelines for the small group dialogues. And so with all of that preamble solidly in place, I want to introduce our fantastic panelists. So first, David Myers is Distinguished Professor of History and holds the Sadie Ludwig Kahn Chair in Jewish History at UCLA, where he serves as the director of the UCLA Luskin Center for History and Policy, as well as the UCLA Bidari Kindness Institute, the Initiative to Study Hate, and the Dialogue Across Difference Initiative. He's the author and editor of many books in the field of Jewish history, and also from 2018 to 23, he served as the president of the New Israel Fund. And Dr. Abu Fraiha is a physician specializing in internal medicine. She's completing a clinical fellowship in critical care medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, and a fellowship at the Middle East Initiative at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard. Dr. Abu Fraiha is a Palestinian Bedouin citizen of Israel who both served as a first responder on October 7th and has lost friends and colleagues both in Israel and in Gaza since then. And so I just want to welcome with a warm round of applause.
Thank you, Maya. I want to just take a moment to thank the incredible staff that has made today's event possible. The incomparable Maya Ferdman, Felicia Graham, Maria Padlan, Manu Mora. Thank you for all that you do, David Wu, of course, in the corner. It's just a great, great pleasure to be in conversation with my dear friend, Yasmeen Abu Fraiha, whom I have gotten to know through our shared work at the New Israel Fund, which, if you're interested, you can look up and see what it does. What I thought I'd do at the outset is really just give Yasmeen and the audience a kind of roadmap of where I'd like to go, where I think this conversation might go. Beginning with the first chapter, which is talking to Yasmeen about where she came from, quite literally and also metaphorically, and particularly what it was like as a Palestinian in Israel. And then I'd like to talk about how Yasmeen got into the medical profession and what that means, before we then turn our attention to October 7th and your experience in attending to those who came in on that terrible morning, that Saturday morning, as news of the massacre made its way out to the world. And then, following that, I want to talk about what it was like for you to observe and take stock of the subsequent devastation in Gaza with the staggering and ongoing loss of life that has occasioned lots of conversations about what that should be called, including many who say it should be called a genocide. And then I want to talk about how you in particular hold on to dissonance and complexity and nuance from your perspective. Before we conclude by thinking about how we might imagine a better world and where compassion and kindness might fit into that. So it's a busy agenda for the next 43 minutes or so. We better get to it because we want to make time for your questions and feedback. So I often, when I'm in such a conversation, like to begin by asking that question, which, as I suggested to you before, can be answered in geographic terms or in kind of metaphysical terms, or both. Maybe both would be the way to go. But the question is, where do you come from, Yasmeen?
So, first of all, thank you for all of you for being here, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for the question. So at the moment, I come from Boston. But I also come from the Middle East, from Israel, from Palestine, geographically at least. I come from a place of conflict, but also I come from a culture of giving and of hospitality. And I love that it is today's World Kindness Day, because that's how I feel. I come from kindness. Me personally, this is my family's story. This is the culture I come from. Okay. So I grew up in a Bedouin household. The Bedouins are very much known for their hospitality and their bringing people together, having an open house so everyone can come in. Part of the culture is also protect everyone who's coming into the house, and the door has to be open for everyone to be welcomed in, and you don't ask questions. So that's how I grew up. And our house, even though we were Bedouins living in a Jewish town, we moved because my parents wanted us to get better education. And sadly, because of the very segregated education system in Israel, you have to be part of the Jewish education system in order to get better education. Still, our house, our home, was always open. We never locked the door. People broke in a few times, I have to say. So it comes with a price. But I remember my childhood as in a home and a neighborhood that is like very lively, always around people, always having people around the table. We called them like the Friday gang. These are like my parents' friends who used to come every Friday after their Shabbat dinner. They would come to our house. And it started after my mother was diagnosed with cancer, which is, to me, I feel like this is such a wonderful thing. This is how you show friendship. Even though we come from different places, the minute she was diagnosed, they started coming every Friday, and it became like this parliament, and they would talk about everything, from politics to sports to whatever happened that week, for years. And I grew up with this notion that not only you have to welcome people into your house, but also you have to give from yourself. Both my parents were people who had to leave their own communities to create a better future for themselves, but also knew that they have to come back and give back to the community. And that's how I was raised. That you go, you invest in yourself, you become a physician, okay, you study medicine, but you have to go back to your own community and give back to the community. My mother was an English teacher in like one of the poorest towns in Israel. It's a Bedouin town, and she got a lot of suggestions because she was a very good teacher to move and teach in a better school. And she said, "No, this is my calling in life. This is what I need to do." And until this day, I have people stop me in the street saying, I know you and I know your mother, and because of her, I became a judge, I became a psychologist, I became an engineer. And my father did the same thing. My father was the first veteran engineer in Israel. He grew up with basically nothing. and created a very good future for himself, for his family. But he knew that it's not enough if you're not going back to give to your own community. And maybe the last thing I'll say is that together they founded also, with other people, they founded a coexistence forum in the Negev that actually helps the Bedouin community and specifically fights for the recognition of unrecognized villages. We can talk more about this later on, but that's basically my family history and where I come from.
Well, that's a really great full answer. The famous women's historian Gerda Lerner talks, really one of the pioneers in creating the field of women's history in the United States, talks in her autobiographical writings of what it was like to grow up as a Jewish girl in Vienna in the 1930s. And she speaks of the double bind that she felt as a girl in a patriarchal society and as a Jew in an anti-Semitic society. And I'm wondering what your experience was like as a girl in a patriarchal society and a Palestinian in Israeli Jewish society.
So I have to say it's been a process. It's an ongoing process, even today. Ups and downs all the time. Growing is a roller coaster, basically. So I'm going to start with the patriarchal question. And I have to say, this again is, I have to thank my parents for this, because they were, both were feminists before they even knew it, that they were feminists. I'm the oldest daughter, and we're 5 siblings, and my father used to take me everywhere. And it's very uncommon in the Bedouin community. But he would this is silly, but he would teach me how to change the tire in the car, because he treated me as his eldest son, basically. And I feel like this has affected me very much, because I gained this confidence of when I go into a room that is full of men, I'm equal. Because that's just that's how I was raised. It's not weird. And I've never felt discriminated against because I'm a woman. That not to say that it's not happening, right? The funny thing is that actually I feel like today, in the medical field I chose to work in, because it's a very, very masculine, critical care is a very masculine profession. So it's the interesting part is just all communities today are patriarchal, and I learned not to say. Many times people are asking me how it is to grow up, in the Bedouin community that treats women differently, and I'm like, this happens everywhere. It's not a Bedouin thing, or like an Arab thing or a Palestinian thing. And I think the main thing that I'm trying to do is elevate other women with me and other people of color or minorities, because I feel like I was so privileged, I was so lucky in life, growing up with my parents, and things were really easy for me when I grew up, even though I was a minority. And I know that if my parents would have decided to stay in this Bedouin town I was born in, I may have had a very different life. So I feel like this obligation to help my friends and my colleagues and people, and specifically women from the Bedouin community. And there's a lot of work I'm doing with that. But definitely elevate women with me whenever I have a chance. And then when you talk about being an Arab and or a Palestinian minority inside the Israeli Jewish majority, this has been. So when I grew up, I felt like you're a teenager, you're a child, all you want is to belong. And we have this really funny videos of our family, of us as kids singing this patriotic Israeli songs, which is insane when I think about this today. Also speaks in a way on the erasure of the Palestinian narrative, but we can talk about this later. But all you want, I had days and nights in which I was like, I was born to the wrong family. I wish I was born Jewish or Israeli or something. And I remember situations in high school in which, like, I after my grandfather died, so we have in Islam culture, we gave everyone this. Everyone got this chapter from the Quran, like on behalf of the deceased. It's some kind of a blessing, and I had mine with me. And I used to take 2 weeks into things, and one day I kept it on the table, went out to recess, came back, it was all torn out on the entire classroom. And I was heartbroken, because these are my friends who did this to me. And that's terrible. And
was that, in a sense, your first encounter?
I think,
your conscious
yeah,
encounter with?
in a way that was my first time I felt like, okay, there is racism here. I didn't even know how to name it. But this is my first memory, at least, of me being different, from my classmates, and them acting in a violent way against me. And I remember I was crying, and I had one friend coming to me, like reaching out, asking what happened, and then I explained, and they didn't really understand what was wrong, and then I said, I don't know how many of you are Jewish in this room, so some will understand. I said, it's as if you would take someone's Tehillim, the Jewish people.
Psalms.
Right, so they have this, like, their own book out of the Bible that they carry with them as part of, like, this is something that keeps me. And you would tear it apart. That's basically what you did. Like, not you necessarily, but the classmates. And then it clicked, and some of my friends helped me, collect all the torn papers and try to assemble it together. But I think this is also like maybe my first memory of understanding how actually my understanding of the Jewish culture helped me express my experience and my feeling, and make them understand like why this is wrong.
And what was your experience like in university? Did you encounter similar kinds of instances?
Yeah. So university is interesting because I studied in Jerusalem, and that was my first encounter with other Palestinians. Out of a class of one, we were 126 classmates in my class.
This is first year medical.
Yes.
Which is a first degree, 6-year degree.
Right, so we do it, it's different, it's 6 years, but we were a class of 126, only 6 were Palestinians. That's basically nothing. When you think of like 20% of the Israeli population is actually, they're Arabs. But also, I got to know Palestinians from East Jerusalem, because you live in this city, and this city doesn't let you avoid any conflict. So you see the disparities between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. And I got to work in a hospital in Hadassah Mount Scopus, which is a hospital in East Jerusalem that is run by an Israeli provider, we'll say, or organization. And this is when I met Palestinians from the West Bank, and Palestinians from East Jerusalem who are not citizens, who are residents but are not citizens. And I knew about their stories and narratives, but I didn't really understand their experience. So this was actually my first time of getting closer to my Palestinian identity. Because even though I grew up in a house in which we kept saying that my parents kept telling us, you're Palestinian, we're Palestinian, we're Israeli, but it's not. I really didn't understand the Palestinian peoplehood until I moved to Jerusalem and worked with them and understand the difference in privileges. And the fact that it is easy for me to travel, but some people still, drive for 15 minutes. They need to go to checkpoints, and it will take them 4 hours. So this was my university experience in a way.
Did that occasion a crisis of identity, or how did you contend with those competing sensibilities and fragments of your identity? You're sort of coming to awareness of what it meant to be a Palestinian, operating in an Israeli institution, growing up in a Jewish town, perfectly fluent in Hebrew.
Yeah.
What were you feeling at that point in university?
That's a great question. So I think maybe because I knew that this period of time is a period of learning. I was open to learn, and I knew that this is going to be difficult. So that's what studying in university is difficult. But I really don't know where I took where I got my strength from, but I did. And I think in a way, it's because I felt like what I'm doing is for my patients. So I'll just give you an example. So I'm a fourth-year student. That's when we start clinical rounds. I'm in Mount Scopus Hospital, and we all round, and we get to a room with a Palestinian.
We should just say the hospital is one of the most integrated places in Israel, where you will find Jews and Arabs working together.
Yes. Yeah. That's important. Like the medical system is very, very integrated. And specifically this hospital, I would say they're like 50-50. And when we go into this room of a Palestinian patient, and growing up in a Jewish town, my first language was actually Hebrew, and my Arabic was not good back then. I understood everything, but it was really hard for me to express myself. When we get into this room, and I'm the only one who can actually, who is expected to translate, okay? And they asked me to translate because this patient doesn't speak Hebrew. And I do it in a very, very broken language. And I leave the room, and my friends look at me and say, and they understand something is wrong. And I tell them, listen, we don't speak Arabic at home. But I go back, and I feel like I have failed this patient, and I have failed myself, because I am supposed to be a virgin, and I failed them, because they can't express, they needed me to express their pain or their struggling, and I couldn't do it. And then my mission for this year was to learn Arabic, to gain this part of my identity back. And here's the irony of life, you wouldn't believe it, but I learned my Arabic in a Jewish religious hospital. And the reason for that was because one of my, my student job was to be Goyish Shabbat. So it's I was the non-Jewish person in the Jewish religious hospital, pressing on buttons on Friday and Saturday. So the religious providers won't have to do it, because it's not it's not something that you need to do for, to save lives, to phone someone. So I would do it. And, all the people who would do it were Arabs or Palestinians. And I was lucky enough to do it in the OBGYN department, where all the workers were women. So I told them, this is my story. Don't judge me. Please help me. I'm going to struggle with this, but I need to gain my Arabic back. And that's how I did it. And I'm fluent. But I gained not only the language, I gained my history and my culture back, and I gained friends. This is such a wonderful asset, because today I can talk to people that I couldn't talk to before. And I feel that was an amazing journey into a part of my identity that I didn't value before.
So what was it like to gain your history and culture back? And what does that mean, and how did you square that with what you had received up to that point? Again, was it easy to reconcile?
No, it's not easy today even. I have to say it's a gift. It's a gift and a curse because on the one hand, first I was brave enough to go back home and ask my parents about their experience. Now I understand what being a Palestinian means. And I can go back and ask them about their experience in the Six-Day War in 1973 and their Nakba stories. And I can go back and talk to my grandparents. And these were things we didn't talk about at home at all. And the other thing is that I figured that, my parents had to give up this for us to have that future. And now, and now I understand how many people, as a minority, what you need to sacrifice so your kids will have a better future. And today, I am working towards the other side, like learning more, asking more, educating more, and understanding there's a major system and a lot of powerful forces that are working, so we won't know where we come from or what our history is. And we is not necessarily only Palestinians and Palestinian citizens of Israel. We see that also, specifically in Israel, we see that also Jews who come from North Africa, Middle East, Yamina area. Their history is totally erased in Israel. The politicization of the Arabic language. Arabic language is not a Palestinian language. It's a language of Jews who came from Arab states too, and it became this thing that is unaccepted or something that we shouldn't hear or can't have in a public space. And we are now, at least I'm trying, because of the process that I've gone through myself, bring it back to the public sphere. Bring it back not from the technical part of it, but from the understanding that we have to fight the erasure of our narratives, histories, stories, because I think you have to know yourself, right? Before you have to know yourself so you can have, I would say, the courage or at least the compassion to be able to know the history of the person next to you.
So it's such an interesting story of reclamation of your past. I'm curious, I'm going to move to a new chapter connected. Where does the field of medicine fit into that? Why did you decide to become a doctor? Why did you decide to study medicine? And how does that fit into sort of what you've just talked about, which is trying to make sense of this very complicated puzzle whose pieces don't always fall neatly into place?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you would ask me, a few years back, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would say my usual story was I always knew that I wanted to be a doctor because my mother was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer when I was 14. So I remember that accompanying her to the hospital was something that I felt so helpless at home. She vomited, she had pain, what can you do? And then you go to the hospital and there's these amazing angels in white who have answers to everything. And I remember saying, this is what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to help people in their most difficult situation in life. When they need help with their pains the most. And that's how I got to medicine. Today, I feel like it was meant to be. It's a match from heaven. I feel like I learned so much from this profession, and I think today I am in medicine because I love people, and I love human beings, and I love learning from them. And I feel like every day that I do that, I become a better person because of my patients and because of my colleagues, and they teach me how to communicate better, and they teach me how to be humble. And they teach me how to be a good team member. And they teach me how to love my family. And they teach me how to value my life, because every day is important. And they teach me how to value other people's life, because every life is sacred. So this is why I'm in love with this profession. I don't know why you guys are studying other things.
It's funny that in medical school. Well, that seems like the appropriate prelude to now what is going to be a very heavy part of our conversation. We're talking about October 7th, and we're talking about Gaza and the ongoing devastation there. You were a first responder on October 7th. Can you tell us where you were and how you experienced those first hours?
Yeah, so I grew up in a southern part of Israel. I grew up under this crazy reality of constant military operations, escalations with the Gaza Strip. And I woke up on the morning of October 7th. It was 6:30 in my home in Beersheba from sirens, basically. And I woke up and I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening again. Right? Out of this today, thinking about this in
because rockets.
because of the rockets coming in, and today in retrospect, I feel like this is such a crazy situation that we got used to it so much that we just say, come on, can't believe this is happening again. And I was the attending on call in my department that day. So I woke up, I heard sirens, I knew that I had to go to the hospital early, because we already had protocols for this. And I didn't open the news, I didn't know what's going on. I came into my department. And the one thing that we need to do is evacuate it, because at least discharge everyone who can't be discharged, because we need to bring people in and make room. And I remember that the first time I learned about what was going on October 7th was actually from one of my patients, because I wanted to discharge her. Because she had this minor stroke, and I said, I'm sorry, usually I would keep you for observation, but I can't. And she said, I don't know if I can go home. I said, what do you mean? And she told me, all the roads are blocked. Didn't you hear? And that's when she started telling me about, militants coming in trucks into the towns in which you could see. And, stories started coming in, and I understood I need to go to the emergency room. They need help. We figured out stuff, and I had enough staff there. And then about 10:30, I went into the emergency room. The hospital I work in is the biggest hospital in Israel. It has the busiest emergency room. I've been working in this emergency room for years. I know it very well, the craziest days. And I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. You go in, and then this sea of people coming in, injured in the most terrible ways. Crying, asking for their families, looking for their friends or their families. We had Bedouin families, full tribes, coming in with bodies of their children in their hands, because they were directly hit by the rockets. And the direct hit was actually because they don't have shelters, and they live in unrecognized villages, so the Iron Dome doesn't cover it because it is considered open spaces, an unpopulated space. So, and you see, I treated foreign workers from the field who came in with severe burns because all the fields were, set on fire. People from Thailand, I treated tourists who came for the music festivals. I treated soldiers, everyone. And the incredible thing is that you don't have, everything collapsed that day. There's no state. There was nothing, people coming in and telling you that there's no police, no one came to rescue them. No one was there to help. The most basic feeling of safety in your own home is gone. And that's the one thing. Think about this when you go home today. How does it feel that your home is not safe? But I also looked around and I saw that the diversity of the patients. What I just told you, Arabs, people from Thailand, people from Portugal, Sweden, whatever, and even Jewish settlers were there, and also the staff was Jewish and Arab people coming to save lives. We worked together, Arabs and Jewish people in this hospital for many years, and all of the physicians and nurses came immediately, even if they were not called. They came immediately once they learned what happened. And I remember two things that I learned that day that it hit me. I don't know. It was, I think, at around 5 p.m. I needed to take a minute. The first thought that came into my mind is say, okay, now I understand how it looks like in Gaza and the West Bank when these things happen. Because we keep saying, again, we used to it. So now I know, now I see in my eyes how it looks like when there's a mass event of killing. And the second thing that I understood that day was that, this is what I need to do, this is where I need to be. And the real divide is between people who pursue death and violence, and think that violence is the way to go, and people who actually, that their first response is to come and save lives, they believe in humanity and believe in the sacredity of human lives. And that's the side I choose.
So, when did you understand both the scale and the trauma, the depths of trauma that would be so evident, as we've talked about, in sort of creating a response in Israeli society? Did you sense that immediately, or did it take time to understand?
Yeah, not immediately, because immediately you're in the moment. I had a colleague who was supposed to come. He's an ENT doctor who was supposed to come in. He was also on call that day, but he's from Kibbutz Be'eri, and he texted his attendant saying, I can't come. Something happened. I may come in later. And he stayed in the clinic to help with the people who got injured, and he was murdered in the clinic. And we learned the story only a week later. All my neighbors, all my colleagues, are people who work there or live there, and this is my community. So we started getting the stories and the scale of this, I think, weeks later, because we were all inside this chaos of we don't know where this is going or what is going on, and we know that this is going into a very bad place. But at the moment, in the first few days and weeks, I remember that all my focus was, let's help people find their missing loved ones.
Meanwhile, shortly after October 7th, the 11th, Israel began an aerial attack on Gaza,
Right.
which was followed up 2 weeks later by a ground invasion,
Right.
which continues to this day. What did you understand about what was going on in Gaza, and what were you thinking, and what was it like to hold on to an awareness of that in that highly traumatized world of Jewish Israel?
I have to say that I was very concerned in the next few days after October 7th, because I know the Israeli people, and I know the Israeli narratives, and I knew that this is going to be a terrible response. I was hopeful for maybe a few days, because it took time until the actual invasion, but it was obvious to me that this is going to be so unproportional. Not that there's any proportional response. Like I'm sorry even that I even use this term, because I don't think that any revenge killing is something that should be, encouraged, obviously. And but I had no idea that this is going to be this terrible. I think this is it was obvious that everyone was acting out of trauma and revenge, and out of pain, and out of this need, like, we will make them pay. And it doesn't matter what it's them. Like, Hamas is a code, okay? It is the feeling, like being there and talking to people, understanding that the pain is so severe that it creates blindness. And this is where my profession comes into play, because I understand the psychology behind this. I had this wonderful professor that I met a few weeks ago, and he had this severe infection, like a nerve infection of the face, and he said, the pain is so terrible that for 2 weeks my entire universe was the left side of my face. I couldn't do anything other than that. Like, I couldn't. He's like the director of a program. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't come to work. I couldn't, deal with my family. Nothing. My entire universe was the left side of my face. And I see that with my patients. When someone has a severe pain, it creates this blindness. You can't see anything but your own pain, and that's it. And we've been dealing with this for now a year plus. And this blindness is not only causing other people pain, but also increases our own pain. And when you think of this, like when I treat patients who have pain, it's not only enough to numb it. You have to go into the root causes. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And people have, it's a choice on how do you deal with pain. You can decide to avoid the root causes. This will definitely not help, because it will come back. Some people choose to throw stuff and make punch the wall. Make it painful in some other places too. Just a natural reaction, but also like a very destructive one. And I always favor the trying to look for the root cause, and even though sometimes it is much more painful at the beginning, this is the way to heal. And I feel like in both the Israeli and Palestinian communities that I at least feel part of, this is like the major issue, trauma and pain. And specifically, just so you maybe can understand a little bit more, the first few weeks of the war kind of lit up collective traumas for both Jewish people and Palestinians, because for the Jewish people, the fact that gunmen, like militants, came into their homes and people had to hide under their beds or in their shelters for hours. For them, they think of the pogroms in Europe, they think of the Holocaust, they think of the Nazis, going into Jewish homes with guns. This is what their grandparents told them. And then for Palestinians, visualizing the incredible lines of people, like miles and miles of people walking with only a few bags from the northern part of the Gaza Strip to the southern part of the Gaza Strip. This brings out memories of the Nakba, the displacement of the Nakba, and the death marches from Lod to Amli. That's the vision that they had in their minds, that their grandparents told them about. Now they see it in real life. And once you have that, you can't see someone else's pain. It's impossible.
Yeah. So you're not a psychiatrist, but
No.
you have a lot of psychological insight into the power of trauma and the blindness it can induce.
Yeah.
And here we are more than a year later, and the Israeli attack continues, and more than 42,000 people have been killed, and 2 million have been displaced. And northern Gaza is now under ferocious assault in ways that comport to what we were talking about a couple of days ago, the plan to cleanse the area.
Yeah.
As a physician, at what point does trauma end? I mean, what can possibly mitigate this such that some sense of the humanity and the scale of suffering become more apparent to the people with whom you grew up and with whom you trained,
Yeah.
your colleagues?
So I'm not a psychiatrist, but I do know the basics. And first is being brave enough to ask for help. Right? This is how we deal with trauma. No one can deal with trauma alone. There's no such thing. And sometimes you need intervention from your friends to tell you, dude, something's wrong, and you need help. So I think both of these things, there has to be some kind of recognition of. So maybe I'll rephrase and I'll say trauma is not. We all have traumas, okay? There's no one who grew up to a certain age and didn't have past traumas. But not all of them cause pathologic patterns of action. Right? This is the difference. Because, I have traumas from my past, but I learned how to deal with them so they won't create this pathologic pattern of action. And if the way you deal with trauma is to keep violence going and keep the same pattern of violent action, then something is wrong, and we need to figure out what do we do with that. And this is when you go to therapy, basically. But how do you deal with it with a collective? And the second question is that some things that are being talked about today is how do you deal with trauma when the trauma is still ongoing? Like the event is not ending. There's still hostages in Gaza. There's still atrocities and massacre, and some say genocide in Gaza. This is still ongoing. And even the psychiatrist that I talked to today will say, we were trained to treat trauma after the trauma's gone, and then we can discuss how to deal with it and actually tell people this is gone. Let's open a new page. But we're not there. So I would say it requires bravery and courage to be able to say, this is hurting me now. Like me hurting other people. I can't use trauma to justify hurting other people. I can't use trauma to justify destruction of lives and communities and society, and I have to find better ways to deal with it. And it, eventually it comes down to just talking about it.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and
Sure.
then open up to the audience for questions. Maybe to be a multi-part question, so I can actually get into 2 or 3 questions, but all in one. So you inhabit multiple worlds, live in multiple cultures, languages, really are a bridge between them. You're also a congenital optimist. And I'm really interested to hear, in light of what you experienced on October 7th and all that you've observed and experienced in looking at what's going on in Gaza, where, if anywhere, does hope reside in you? And maybe you can tell us, how compassion and kindness might fit into that vision of hope. I mean, are you able in this moment to hold on to any meaningful measure of hope?
I can. I think we don't have the privilege to give up. And I find hope in people. And I started by saying, I love human beings. I truly do. And I believe in them. I know that sometimes we do terrible things, but I also try to learn from history. And at least to me, history teaches me that people strive for freedom all along history, every time. And that every time the fight for freedom is successful. It takes time, and it takes a lot of hard work. But it's really, you want to...
Are you confident that you will see in your lifetime freedom for Palestinian people?
Yes. Yeah, I'm confident. I think this moment in time is a critical moment that will... I'm hopeful that this will be the independence war of the Palestinian state. Because look, I've been talking about this endlessly since October 7th, and people's minds have changed. It wasn't on the world's agenda 2 years ago. Who cared about the Palestinians? And now everyone understands that they need to be free. Even those who try to fight it and try to talk against it understand that this is the essence. The essence is the fight for freedom. And this is why I feel hopeful, because people are free and sweethearts are made. Oppression is not a sustainable way of regime. And maybe the second thing that I'll say is that talking about history, I keep thinking about the Yom Kippur War. The War of 1973 was a war between these two enemies, the Israeli army and the Egyptian army, after decades of bloodshed and conflict. And it was a surprise done by the Egyptian army towards the Israeli army. And I asked people, our elderly, did you even imagine that you'll have peace with Egypt? A year after, in 1974. People said no. We thought they were Nazis. And then five and a half years later, there's peace with Egypt that is holding until today, more than 45 years after that. It's the safest border between Israel and any Arab country. And it happened 5 years after a terrible conflict. So we should, and the second thing is that I'd say that if Israel and Germany has such a wonderful relationship, less than a century after the Holocaust, any conflict in the world can be solved.
Okay, I have many more questions. I could sort of tuck them into my major question as sub-questions, but I'm going to resist that impulse.
Okay.
And let's open up for questions from the audience. Let's see, Gabi.
Hi. It's a privilege generally to listen to you. My wife Nab and I met in the intensive care unit in Soroka Hospital, Beersheba, where you did your training in the 1970s. And we got to work with the first Bedouin doctor, Dr. Abu Fraiha, you probably knew him, who was my colleague. I'm not hopeful.
You're not?
No.
Okay.
I'm not hopeful. The only hope I can see is when I go to Israeli hospitals. Because that's the one place, and you talked about it David, where Jews and Arabs and Palestinians work together in a normative environment. And then when I go to these hospitals, I think, why can't it be like this? Why can't it be like this? Because it pretty much is like that in a hospital environment that you find yourself. So the question I would ask you is, how can we make that little spark that we see in hospitals? I think even to this day, when things are so miserable, beyond miserable, how can we make that spark develop into a fire that can produce the hope that you have? I don't.
So I agree with you, and I think this is why Palestinian citizens of Israel are the key to this conflict. And also, I would say that there's Israel has done, in a way, a natural experiment of how to deal with Palestinians. They tried siege in Gaza. We saw the result of that. They tried occupation and apartheid in the West Bank. This is one of the most violent places in the area. They tried equality and freedom. It's not the best equality. I have things to say about the discrimination against Palestinian citizens of Israel, but equality and freedom, and that works. And this is, we need to go back to basics and say, okay, equality and freedom, and that's how we can create better life to everyone in this area.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such an honor and just an immense pleasure and fortune to listen to you, so thank you. My name is Eliza. I'm a professor in the sociology department. I have followed by saying I met my husband at Hashem of all places. So I study how people make decisions about violence, and I look at dehumanization as a consequence rather than a cause of violence, which really speaks to what you were saying about trauma-induced blindness. And at the same time, maybe like the meaning of my name, I'm someone who's sort of full of optimism and hope like yourself. I find that hope and optimism sometimes in the people within Israel currently who are fighting so hard for an alternative, particularly among the hostage families. And so many of the people who were attacked in these kibbutzim were people who had been striving for an end to the occupation. Likewise, so many people, including among our students, who mobilized to try and create a free Palestine, we can say, are Jewish descendants of Holocaust survivors. And so trauma can do so many different things. People can interpret it so many different ways. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to the inequalities within Israeli society, to the political conflicts within Israeli society, and how you understand that as well, moving forward with, I share your optimism, finally freedom for Palestinians.
Sure. So I'm going to say something that may be triggering a little bit to some of you. I don't know because I don't know you. So just take a deep breath. I think if we're talking about root causes, I think part of the problem, thinking about Gaza and the West Bank and the inequalities in it and inside Israel or Israel proper, is that there's a shift towards Jewish supremacy. And this is the ideology, right? When you look at the nation-state bill in 2018, saying like the only people who have the right to self-determination in this land are Jewish people, and the only people who the Arab language has lost its formal status because of that bill. And we see the consequences for that. Just so you know, it was this law was challenged in the Israeli Supreme Court, and The Supreme Court said, we're going to allow this law to pass because it's a declarative law. It has no practical meaning. But we see the practical meaning in our lifetime, because in the time that it's passed after that, because we see that it is acceptable by Israeli authorities that some people worth more than others. And we see that in the education system, we see that in housing, we see that in how the police fights crime. And this is in the flawed democracy, which is like Israel, without talking about beyond the green line, so let's say. And going back even more, and that is what I usually tell my Israeli Jewish friends, is that this is, when you avoid discussing the important and the difficult conversation, this is what happens. Why? Because they couldn't figure out, like the Ben-Gurion in 1948, couldn't figure out whether they want Jewish or democratic. They said both. And I mean, that's fine if you discuss what it means to have like a Jewish state, what it means to have a democratic state. But once you say, I really don't want to discuss this because I don't want to have conflicts with my ultra-Orthodox partners or with the Arab partners or whatever, then how do you balance? How do you balance saying like I will have only a Jewish prime minister or president, and I will have is a Jewish state meaning that all the state should be closed on Saturday? How is that democratic? How is what is happening in the West Bank democratic? Right? How is that like having apartheid, different sets of rules to Jews and Palestinians? How is that democratic? And this is a conversation that needs to be held within the Israeli Jewish community, and is not, and the avoidance of dealing with this tension for 76 years has brought us to this point where it is absolutely not democratic anymore. And some would argue this is going to be, the Jewish part is going to be actually a theocracy. And the protest that we saw before October 7th was actually part of now, like the privileged class is fearing for their own privilege and their own rights, and they're like, oh wait, it's not democratic anymore. It wasn't democratic before. So this is why we should definitely talk about the difficult conversations that we need to hold, and we have to commit now to be able to talk about Jewish supremacy, talk about apartheid, talk about trauma, talk about massacres. It doesn't. When I say these things, it's not to say to my Jewish Israeli friends, it means that Israel should be wiped out the map. No, that's not what I'm saying. And I believe that no one, at least no one that I know, is saying that. But we can't also, keep avoiding these issues. This isn't an asymmetric conflict. That's the reality. And if we keep saying no, if this justifies or it is symmetric, and like we do this because they did that, this is endless. So I encourage you to talk about these issues.
We have a question over here, and then I want to invite any students in particular who might have questions or folks over there on that side also who may want to.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Reza. Hearing your story reminded me a lot about myself. Growing up, my family's from Afghanistan. Obviously, the longest war in American history was on Afghan soil. And then also being in medicine, I apologize for being in my work clothes. It's so douchey.
I love it. I'm sorry, I'm not in scrubs now.
No, I had a shift after this. Your journey into medicine also was very reminiscent of mine. At every stage of my life that I've learned about this conflict, both formally and informally, I have noted that American moneyed interests, in particular evangelical interests, only fuel the carnage more. And I don't know what that looks like on the ground in Israel. I don't know if your Jewish Israeli friends feel that as well. I don't know if you feel that as well. Because from an American's perspective, it's honestly disgusting. And it's so hard to swallow. And I don't know how that plays out, both on the ground or even in like the politics that exist in Israel.
So it depends, right? We can't put all the Israeli Jews in the same bucket. Some actually say, we need this, like we need the funds to keep fighting because like we can't without the Americans. Some would say, who cares? Like we can deal with that one. And this is also when you think about dealing with trauma or an addiction. This is another path into medicine a little bit. I a little bit think that Israelis are addicted to using force. Think of, when you talk to like a friend who's an alcoholic. They can admit, yes, I have a problem. Or they can say, no, I don't have a problem, shut up and not continue drinking. So it's basically the difference in reaction that you will hear from Israelis talking about American funds. They'll be either like, oh my God, how can we deal without it? Like, yes, we have a problem. And some will even say there was a letter that many, and a petition that many actually signed a few weeks ago by Israeli academics to the international community saying, please save us from ourselves. Please boycott us. Please don't fund this. Like, we won't be able to continue on our own and we need your help. So just stop funding this. So you hear this response, and also you hear people saying, F them, sorry. We will figure it out. Like, the Jewish mind is amazing, and we have our own stamina, and we'll be fine. But I really think that in the bottom of this, what it means is that people in Israel care a lot about what you guys think and do. That's what it means. So I encourage you to do what feels right for you. I have to say that I had to go out of the bubble of Israel. The first time I lived outside of Israel was 3 years ago, to actually learn what my tax money is doing, right? Even though I knew in the back of my mind that once you start seeing it from like an outsider eye, because you get different media channels and you get to meet people who know more than you, that's the key, to talk to people. I cried for like days, and there's nothing I can do about this. I can't stop paying taxes. But you guys have things that you can do. There's a way to resist. Everyone can resist in their own way.
I'm going to take it. This is an extremely important point, especially because of the pipeline between money raised on behalf of an organization called Christians United for Israel and the settlement movement, which has become such a dominant force in Israeli political life. In fact, nothing can be done without basically the authorization of the settlement movement, which is a close ally of the Christian evangelical conservative movement. I think we're going to move to our small groups, but I want to ask you one final question. I just want to say that I honestly don't know anybody who can speak hard truths, hold on to nuance, and do so with such kindness and compassion as you. I really don't know anyone. And I'm wondering, what are the psychic costs of doing that for you? Like, what do you carry around with you? And what do you do to maintain your sanity? I mean, what do you do? I mean, we've talked about this a lot. We believe the world is divided between those who believe in the sanctity of all human life and those who pick sides. So, okay. But in this current moment, as the war continues and the tally of destruction grows, how do you maintain your equilibrium, your sanity? And what do you do to try and anchor yourself, to center yourself in a spiritual practice?
It's tough. It really is tough. Because, I choose my words very carefully, because I never know who's listening, what is triggering, what is not. So it is tough, and sometimes you get things that are triggering to you. But what I do is that I do try to find, my own people, like-minded people, where I can just be myself. So I can, most of the time, I can hold nuances and get frustrated, but contain it, and then go to my own community eventually. And I think that's also what is keeping me hopeful. You know our people on the New Age Fund and the amazing activists that are doing things on the ground. I feel very lucky to work with them, and I feel like when I go home to a community of people that I don't know, I can just be myself with them. So that'll be one thing, and I do a lot of mindfulness, I have to say, which is very helpful, because it helps you just be present and be humble again. I think humility is such an important word that we don't use enough and we don't practice enough, because we go into a conversation with this notion that we know everything, and the other person in the room, they're just stupid. And they know nothing. I'm here to teach them, to show them the light. And I think there's something about, this is again something that I learned from my patients. Just be humble. I don't know everything. So I get that from mindfulness, and I get that from reading. So these are my spiritual things. And just being in spaces with people like you.
Okay, so we're going to move to the final part of our program, which Maya is sort of guide us through, but I do want to take this opportunity to just express my incredible gratitude and appreciation to Yasmeen Abu Fraiha.